Before we begin, pause for just a moment. If you're someone who enjoys stories that don't rush, stories that sit with you quietly, stories that unfold not through shock, but through feeling, then subscribe to this channel. Because these stories aren't made to distract you for a few minutes. They're meant to stay with you. They're meant to echo softly in the background of your own life. Tonight's story moves slowly. It doesn't shout. It doesn't warn you. What begins as an ordinary evening, the kind you've lived through hundreds of times, will change something small, subtle, and permanent. And those changes are the ones that linger the longest. Now let's begin. Some evenings don't arrive with drama. There's no thunder in the distance. No phone vibrating with bad news. No sudden interruption that tells you, this is important, pay attention. They simply appear. Quietly. Almost politely. And yet, when you look back, those are the evenings that matter most. That was the kind of evening that found Mark Harper. He didn't notice it all at once. There was no single moment where he thought, something is wrong. Instead, it came to him gradually. He was standing at the kitchen window, one hand resting against the cool stone of the counter, the other loosely holding a glass he'd forgotten to drink from. Outside, the sky was changing its mind. Gold faded into gray. Not abruptly, but hesitantly. The sun lingered longer than expected, as if unsure whether to leave or stay, brushing the clouds with soft light, before finally giving up and slipping away. The result wasn't peaceful, but it wasn't threatening either. It was unresolved, like a thought that starts forming but never quite finishes. Inside the house, everything else continued as it always did. The refrigerator hummed, steady, dependable. The wall clock marked time with quiet authority. From the living room, the evening news murmured on, voices blending into background noise that no longer demanded attention. Mark had heard these sounds for decades. They were familiar in the way breathing is familiar. And yet, tonight, they didn't ground him. They felt distant, unconvincing. He tried to focus on them anyway, tried to anchor himself in the ordinary rhythms of his life. But his thoughts refused to stay put. There was a sensation, faint, persistent, like a tug just beneath the surface. Not fear, not excitement. Awareness. The uncomfortable kind. The kind you haven't felt in years. Something was shifting. Elaine Harper stood near the dining table, turning a folded piece of paper over in her hands. She had picked it up from the mailbox nearly an hour earlier. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. Just another envelope. Another small interruption in an otherwise predictable day. She'd slipped it into her pocket without reading it right away, brought it inside, set down her keys, gone through the motions of an evening she knew by heart. But she hadn't thrown it away. And that alone was unusual. Now she unfolded it again, smoothing the crease with her thumb, her fingers tracing the ink as if the paper itself might reveal something the words hadn't said out loud. The message was simple. A dinner invitation. From Ryan and Sophie, the young couple who had moved in next door just a few months earlier. They were polite, friendly, full of energy that still belonged to beginnings. The note was warm, thoughtful, carefully written. The first time Elaine had read it, she'd laughed softly. "They're sweet," she'd said, almost dismissively. Her tone had carried the weight of years. Years of knowing herself well, of understanding exactly where she stood in the world. Too settled, too tired, too familiar with her own routines. And yet she was still holding the note. She moved around the kitchen with an almost unconscious urgency, wiping down a counter that was already clean, straightening a chair that hadn't moved, adjusting a placemat slightly, then adjusting it back again. Busy motions. Restless ones. Mark noticed. After nearly 3 decades of marriage, he didn't need explanations. He had learned to read the spaces between her movements, the pauses between her breaths. Something had touched her. Something she hadn't named yet. Their life together had been good. That much was true. Stable. Reliable. Built slowly and carefully over years of shared decisions. The house reflected that history. Photographs lined the walls. Vacations, holidays, milestones captured and framed. Furniture chosen not for impulse, but for durability. For comfort. Their routines were so established they required no discussion. Comfort had its place. Safety did too. But Mark had learned something over the years. Comfort, left unchecked, could quietly dull things. Not dramatically, just enough to be unnoticed. Do you think it would be strange if we went? Elaine asked. Her voice was casual. Too casual. As if she were testing the idea aloud before allowing herself to feel anything about it. Mark didn't answer immediately. Outside, the last light was fading. The sky had settled into a darker shade now, nudging them toward a decision they hadn't realized they were avoiding. It might be, he said finally. Then he paused. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. They both felt it. Neither of them said it. The curiosity. The faint spark of something they had almost forgotten. The idea of stepping outside the boundaries of their carefully built life, even for a single evening, carried a quiet pull. When they finally left the house, the air outside felt sharper, cooler. It woke something in them. The street they'd walked 1,000 times suddenly felt different, as if seen through a new lens. The walk to the neighboring apartment building was short, but each step felt longer. Elaine walked slightly faster than usual. Mark noticed his hand hovering near hers. The urge to reach out suddenly complicated by uncertainty. Why did something so small feel unfamiliar? Laughter drifted from inside the apartment before they even reached the door. Warm, effortless, alive. Elaine hesitated. Then she knocked. Softly. The door opened almost immediately. Ryan's smile was bright, unforced, genuine. Sophie's followed, open and welcoming. And in that instant, Mark understood something he hadn't expected. This wasn't just a dinner invitation. It was a threshold. A doorway into something uncertain. Something that might stir emotions long left untouched. Something that wouldn't announce itself, but would linger all the same. As they stepped inside, the world shifted. Subtly. Quietly. But undeniably.